Today's lesson that we're doing together, its message begins with a lesson for all of you on how you personally can create a sculpture. And I'm not talking about just some kind of beginner's level sculpture. I'm talking about a high quality art gallery worthy masterpiece of a sculpture. And I'm going to give you this very quick lesson on how to create it. And it's very easy, believe it or not. And let's just say for the purpose of this lesson, we're going to create a sculpture of a horse. And here's how you do that. You take this big block of marble, and you take a hammer, and you take a chisel, and you place that chisel gently on that marble, and you begin to chip away at everything that doesn't look like a horse. And that's all there is to it. Now, does this piece here look like a horse? No. I'm just going to chip that away. Does this piece here look like a horse, this section over here? No, I don't think so. And so we're just going to chip that away. And after you chip away everything that doesn't look like a horse, then you're going to have, as a result, a sculpture of a beautiful horse. Now, professional sculptors would be hard-pressed to say that there's more to it than what I just described for you there. Of course, let's be frank, there is a little bit of a trick to it, a little bit of talent that is required, a little bit of artistry in your life, and really only the best sculptors could do something like this. You see, you really do have to be able to distinguish between which parts of the marble look like a horse and which parts don't. And that really is the hard part, isn't it? Being able to see the horse or the statue or the bust or the dog or the cat or the bird that is hidden within that marble. It takes really a special kind of vision. But if you can see it, then you really can just chip away everything that doesn't look like the end result that you've set out to create. I'm being a little bit facetious here this morning, of course, but there's a principle behind this exaggerated example that I'm giving you, and it's essential for all of us if we truly want to live a life of vision like we've been talking about over the last couple weeks. So we're in the final week of a three-part series in which we've been talking about how we as individuals, how we as a church can turn the page on the year that's behind us and how we can make this year our best year ever as we can set ourselves on a course for this lifelong vision that I'm referring to, that I'm talking about. In week one, if you remember, we talked about how vision begins with the ability to see this day, with precision and accuracy, to have a clear understanding of who we are and where we are in this particular moment. And this involves taking a complete and thorough inventory, a no-holds-bar evaluation of our strengths and our weaknesses, and how we can best apply ourselves to the task of us serving others like we've been called to do. Last week, we talked about the key to living a life of vision is to develop an ability to see today in terms of where it is today can take you. And this involves being able to define what you really want for your life, or even better, let's be frank, being able to define what you believe God is wanting for your life, where He's wanting to take you. So this involves learning to view your future in terms of what might be the best possible outcome and determining that which is most worthy of your best efforts. These questions, I think, can help develop a long-term perspective for you on what you want your life to become in the Lord. Today, we're talking about putting all of this vision into practice. Just like Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house upon the rock, from Matthew chapter 7, verse 24. And our God-given vision for the life that we are called to live must be more than just a simple dream. It must be more than just some good intentions. It must be something that is actually put into practice. Thomas Edison said these words: vision without execution is hallucination. In other words, it's a dream that's never going to be realized. You just think about how many times you heard a losing football coach say, "We lost the game because we failed to execute. We had the right game plan, but we called the right plays, but we just didn't execute. The receiver was open, but he dropped the ball. The linebacker didn't make the block. The quarterback threw to the wrong player," and so on. And you hear this virtually every Monday morning at the press conferences from the first week of September until the end of January. Vision without execution is hallucination. It's a fantasy. It's a vapor in the wind, and it does no one any good whatsoever. Therefore, today's message is going to be about this idea of execution. And today we're going to look at 3 simple steps involved in putting your long-term vision into practice on a day-to-day basis. So here are 3 things that you need to know this morning. The first thing I would tell you is this: start with a process of elimination. Start with a process of elimination. Here's what I mean. Each day, you are given this big block of marble to work with, and you want to sculpt it into something beautiful, and so you start chipping away at everything that doesn't look like a horse, so to speak. This means that you look at the marble block of your behavior, and you ask yourself, does this behavior look like the person that I want to be? Does this look like a loving husband? Does this look like a loving wife? Does this look like a devoted disciple? Does this look like a dedicated employee? Does this look like a man or woman of God? If the answer is no, then you've got to chip away at that marble, and you need to eliminate that behavior. This is what Paul was referring to when he said, "Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry." And that comes from Colossians chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. And so if you want to be a person of vision, if you want your life to be what it is that God intended it to be, what it can be in Him, if you're willing to say some things have to go, then you're on your way to where you need to be in putting a vision into place and working on it. Some of the things that need to change may not be quite so obvious at first glance because they're not really all that bad, but neither are they beneficial. They just don't look like the person you really want to be. Maybe it means a little less time on social media. Maybe it means maybe a little less time with the TV, or less time spent with certain people who tend to drag you down spiritually, or spending your money differently, or planning your eating habits differently. All of this is moving you in the direction of asking, which of my habits, which of my attitudes and behaviors do not look like the person that I want to be? Living with vision means that you're willing to chip away that which needs to be chipped away. Now, here's the second step in putting your long-term vision into practice. And this may sound like common sense, and it really kind of is. You just simply need to develop a daily routine. Develop a daily routine. When John Grisham, anybody ever heard of John Grisham? John Grisham got an idea to write his first novel. He was a practicing an attorney with a heavy caseload and full-time obligations and family life. John Grisham did become a successful novelist who is now at this point a multi-millionaire because of so many best-selling novels, and so many of them which have been turned into movies. Okay? Now, he, in the beginning, had a story that he wanted to tell, but there was just no easy way to get it done. And he knew that he couldn't crank out a novel in just a few short weeks like Stephen King or James Patterson seems to be able to do. So he decided he would do what he could do, what he knew he could do. He resolved that he would go to the office an hour early each day and write one page a day. And this way he could finish his first draft of his book in about a year. And that's exactly what he did. And that book is entitled A Time to Kill. And maybe you've read that book. It found its way to a publisher, and it became a bestseller and a popular movie, and it launched really a very impressive writing career for John Grisham. And this happened because John built his daily routine around the vision that he had for his life. And so that means on the days that he didn't feel like writing, he wrote anyway. And when he wasn't sure what he should be happening next in the story, he kept on writing. And when countless agents and publishers said no thanks to the first round of queries, he kept on writing day after day after day. And I want to share with you, if I can, a psalm that's attributed to Moses. Psalm 90, verse 12 says, "Teach us to number our days aright, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." And as you've heard me probably say before, he's not talking about counting our days as much as he's talking about making our days count. In other words, we need to make the most of every day that we've been given. The question we must ask ourselves is, in order to live the life that God wants me to live, in order to be the person that God wants me to be, what must I do on a daily basis or on a regular basis? And so let me suggest, generally speaking, you can start with these things: prayer, Bible study, serving others, worship, fellowship, and discipleship. And for each one of us individually, it also will include some very specific things like time with your family or time with your spouse or exercise or work and on, depending on your life circumstances or your life situation. And these daily and weekly habits are so important that it's not enough just to simply think about them and say, boy, these would be good things and I would like to do them. We need to write them down. We need to put them in our schedule. And this is the execution part of our vision that Thomas Edison was talking about. So the key to living a life of vision is the ability to see today in terms of what it is that actually needs to get done, what needs to be done. In 1 Chronicles chapter 12, there's a list of various groups of men who were prepared to join David in battle against King Saul. And I particularly like the way one group was described in this text from 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32, where it says, "The sons of Issachar, men who understood the times with knowledge of what Israel should do." And this is the kind of men and women that we must strive to be personally, the kind of people who understand the times that we are living in, and we know who we are, and we know where we are, and we know God is calling us to be something, and we also know that what we need to do in order to live that life that we know would be pleasing to God, and most important of all, we need to be prepared to do it. Vision without execution is hallucination. And the execution is something that must be done on a daily basis. Now, here's the third and final step of putting your vision into practice. Let's just settle in for the long haul. Settle in for the long haul. There's a verse in Proverbs that's helpful to us. I'm going to read it from the Living Bible version. It says there, "Steady plodding brings prosperity. Hasty speculation brings poverty." Psalm 21, verse 5. Steady plodding brings prosperity. This phrasing of this verse reminds me of William Carey, who's known today as the father of modern missions. And William Carey was a man whose life was driven by vision. And specifically a vision of that those living in foreign lands who had never heard the gospel of Jesus Christ would be introduced to Jesus Christ and would be taught to live a life of discipleship. And once in a meeting of preachers, he introduced the topic of our obligation to fulfill the Great Commission, to go into all the world and preach the gospel. And there was an older minister there who interrupted him and said to him, "Sit down, young man. When God pleases to convert the heathen, he'll do it without consulting you and me." Now, Carey refused to surrender his vision. In 1792, he organized a mission society, and in the first meeting, he preached a sermon entitled, "Expect Great Things from God and Attempt Great Things for God." That's a great sermon title, isn't it? Sometimes you hear sermon titles that are so good, you really don't even need to hear the sermon. They might actually spoil the sermon title. You hear the title, and it's enough to convict you. A year after he founded the Missionary Society, William Carey and a colleague packed up their belongings and gathered their families, and they set sail for India to begin a new work there. And the first years were not easy at all. In fact, they were very devastating. Carey himself contracted malaria and was bedridden for months. His son died from dysentery. His colleague that went with him gave up and went back to England, leaving Carey alone with his grieving family. He faced enormous financial pressure, and he went years without seeing any results at all. To be exact, it was 7 years before he baptized his first convert. But William Carey had settled in for the long haul, and he kept working day after day after day. And over the next 3 decades, he translated the Bible into India's major languages. He founded a college which is still in existence today, and he brought about significant social reform in the Indian culture. Toward the end of his life, he attributed one thing to his success. He wrote, "I can plod and I can persevere to any definite pursuit." I want you to understand this morning, there is no vision without plotting. There is no vision without some kind of day-to-day execution. So this is why Paul wrote, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." That's from Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. If you want to live a life of vision like we're talking about, then you've got to settle in for the long haul. You've got to be prepared to persevere, living by the same objectives and following them, that same path day after day, year after year. Now, when we think of people who have great vision, we often think of someone who has a unique insight to what it is that lies ahead. And they have the ability to anticipate what will be trending in the years to come. And think about people like Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, or Bill Gates of Microsoft. Vision does involve the ability to see what lies on the horizon. That's for sure. That's really part of it, but it's not the only part of it. Those with the greatest vision are those who can see today as it needs to be seen. That's what this series has actually been about. Today, you've been given a block of marble for you to work with, and those with vision can see what is hidden inside that marble, a horse, so to speak. And they also know how then to chip away at everything that doesn't resemble that horse. Those with vision understand that the promise of the future is found in today. We have just seemed to come to a close with many many would consider the worst year of their lives. And truth be told, we know it's not even over yet. We're still dealing with it. We're still wearing masks. We're still doing social distancing. We're still having to endure those commercials that tell us we're in this together by all those celebrities on TV. But it's not over. But that doesn't mean that we can't turn the page and begin to look forward to the next chapter within our story. That doesn't mean that we can't begin today to live with a vision that will lead us deep into the future. This is where the turn the page vision begins. You see today with accuracy and precision. You have a clear understanding of who you are and where it is that you are in life. You see today in terms of where it is that it can take you, and you see it in terms of what the future can hold. And you see today in terms of what it is that needs to be done. Like the men of Issachar, you understand the times and you know what you need to do. You see that block of marble and you recognize the part that doesn't look quite like a horse. And so you begin to chip away. You execute the play. You follow through with action day after day after day. At the beginning of this series, and then again last week, I mentioned Ted Williams to you, how his excellent vision gave him an advantage over other players at the plate, and how his lifelong dream was to be the greatest hitter of all time. And today I want to close this series with one more Ted Williams story. And do you know how his career ended? It didn't end with any kind of controversy. It didn't end in a scandal or some kind of disgrace. Neither did he just simply fade away. In the last game that he played on September the 28th, 1960, in Fenway Park, in his final at-bat, he stood at the plate. He took a pitch or two until he saw one that he liked, and with his final swing, as a Major League Baseball player, he drove the ball high into right field, deep into the stands. And he did what every baseball player dreams of doing. He ended his career with a home run. God desires the very same thing for you. That your life will be lived in such a way that you can just knock that final pitch right out of the park. That's what vision will do for you. And so I just ask this morning, let us turn the page together. As individuals and as a church family, let's just turn the page. As we say farewell to the worst year imaginable, we can just gear up for the best year possible, can't we? Let's live each day, beginning with this day, to the fullest. Amen. That's my message this morning. Allow us to use this time at the end of our service to offer an invitation today to anyone who may have need to respond to God's call on their lives. We encourage you this morning to make sure that you have got yourself right in that situation with Him, that you have that everlasting relationship so that you can begin to live out the vision for what it is that He has in mind for you. Do you need to give your life to Jesus today? Do you need to recommit yourself to Him? Do you need to have a church home, a place that you have said, yes, this is my church home, and I'm going to serve here. I'm going to serve the kingdom here with my brothers and sisters in the Lord. If you need the prayers of the church because of an upcoming situation, surgery, serious concern, you're just going through a difficult time, we stand ready to help you in whatever way that we can. Let's stand together. We're going to sing the first and last verse of 483, Whiter Than Snow.